We're going to show you how we do it. We're
Absolutely.
really excited. It's awesome. Good morning, everyone. Again, we are the Civic Lab. We are a Black-led nonprofit community organization. We are a do tank. We don't just walk the walk. We don't just talk the talk. We walk the walk, engaging our communities and expanding imagination about what Chicago could be. So that's what we're all about. Next slide, please, ma'am.
Sure.
And we are your trainers today. I'm Phil Thomas, and Ama Johnson's my partner. Why don't we start with Ama? Ama, say
So,
hello, introduce
hello,
yourself.
everybody. So I know everybody was asked to put like one word or how they're feeling this morning. I'm just feeling like spring is just toying with me, but that's okay. Maybe in another week or two, it'll get stable. But I'm Ama Johnson. I'm been a trainer with the Civic Lab now for about a year. My background is in organizational development, resource development, program and project development for probably over 30 years now. Also the co-founder and CEO of my own nonprofit online school, Ubuntu Institute for Global Learning. And why I'm here today, as always, it's to, help you guys become stronger in what you do, more effective programming, stronger infrastructure and organizational development for you all. So that's, why I'm here today. Can't wait to jump into what we're going to be going over today. It's one of my fortes. So when we talk about goals, objectives, and outcomes, and how we develop those things to make our proposals stronger. So I can't wait to get started. Phil?
Yes, I'm Phil Thomas. Pleasure to be here this morning. I come at this work from three kind of different angles. Government. I started in government. I was in philanthropy as a senior program officer at the Trust and the Woods Fund. And then I worked for various nonprofits doing fundraising and administration. So through all of that, I have I bring all those perspectives into talking about this subject matter today. So really excited about sharing. And if I had a word today, for me, it would be symptoms. I have allergy symptoms. Spring hits me hard. So you might see me with my glasses on, off, or you might see me just with the video, with my home screen on, because I don't want you to see me cry, because it's not from tears of sorrow. It's just allergies. So anyway, with that, let's go to why we are here. We are here because we have this what's called the NOFO, Access to Justice Notice of Funding Opportunities. And we want to go over this into detail because if you don't know what you're doing, the NOFO can be a mofo. So let's start at the top. And there we can see there that they've been published. The NOFO is published. You go to that site. Everyone should have already visited IllinoisAccessToJustice.com and looked at the publication there. There was a technical assistance session given by the A2J staff, the program officers on the 12th. I hope everyone has an opportunity to look at that before you start doing your actual package. Again, that session was recorded and is available at the Illinois Access to Justice site. So that is essential that you actually look at that. That will make today's presentation that we're doing here on the 19th, it fits with that. So they are complements to each other and designed to be that way. So please pay attention to both. The next thing is on the 20th. If you are submitting for a new program, or you were an existing grantee and you're applying for something that you didn't get a grant for before, then you have to do a submit the interest form that lets the HUJ staff anticipate your proposal. But if you're simply renewing the grant that you had before, you do not have to do that form. And if I got that right, Jane, anything that we say might be in variance, Jane, who's on the Lombardi, who's on the call, please put that in the notes for any kind of clarification. But our understanding is that form, submit interest form, is for a new program or a totally new grantee. Okay, I got that right. Thank you, ma'am. All right. Then next thing that you need to know is that everything that we talk about here, you can have questions answered specifically by the program officers, Jane and Cherise, respectively to the program you are, and you can submit those questions right there at the Illinois Access to Justice site. So you have until
April 22nd.
April 22nd, see the eyes, to do that. So get on this right away while you have your attention. Don't save this to the last minute, and then get that information you need. Then you get on the Smart Simple portal. That's where you actually do the form itself. And those forms are due on May the 6th. They can't be late. Do not be late. So have all your materials in by in or before May the 6th. And if I were you, I would do it before, just so that if there are any glitches, this is technology we're using, you got all your bases covered. And then finally, the applicants will be notified on the 15th of June. So those funding decisions will be made and you'll be informed of them at that time. And hopefully everybody on this call will have a successful outcome because they did everything according to the book. Next slide, please, ma'am.
All right. So we're going to just jump right in. This, like we said, this training is about coming up with goals, objectives, and outcomes, SMART deliverables that are, well, let's get into it, that are SMART, right? So what does it mean to be SMART? What is that SMART framework? SMART goals, objectives, and outcomes are specific. They focus on the who, the what, and the where. Clear and specific goals are easier to evaluate and determine if they have been accomplished. So we definitely, when you're going back and looking at your program, you want to make sure that it's specific enough that you know what you need to be measuring, okay? It needs to be measurable. So utilizing quantifiable metrics, numbers, how many families, how many participants, how many cases, that kind of thing. And it allows you to track progress and how much change is expected, okay, over time. Or you will know at different times in the calendar year how many clients you should be working with, okay? Because you will have come up with a number and then you will also have put it in a timeline. Make sure it's achievable. Is it realistic and attainable given program resources and planned implementation? So there, very important. We're talking about the timeline, planned implementation, program resources, your budget. Have you made sure that you've budgeted everything you need to make sure that you can achieve your goals, objectives, and outcomes in your program? So make sure it's achievable. Is it realistic? How many families are you working with for the year? How many clients do you need to case manage for the year? And then what do you need in order to carry that out? Are your goals, objectives, and outcomes relevant to your mission and your program? So does it align with your organizational mission as well as the grant funder's mission? And does it relate to the problem you're trying to address? So it's very explicit what A2J wants you to address. So are your programming goals and outcomes aligned with what the funder's mission is? And does it make sense for your organization? Okay, so make sure that that makes sense. And then they're time bound. So this is an annual grant or a year-long funding. So your programming has to make sense and have some outcomes within that year. Okay, also your funding, all the money that you need, you should be apportioning that for one annual year. Okay, so these goals, objectives, and outcomes are time bound. They identify the target date by when the goal, objective, and the outcome will be achieved. Okay, so that's where you get your SMART from. All of your goals, objectives, and outcomes should be measured against these SMART indicators. Okay. And let me give credit where credit is due. This framework comes from Guidehouse, which is a professional services firm that actually works with the state of Illinois and other governments to help organizations be ready to submit for grants. Okay. Okay, so let's get right into it. Program goals. So your goal needs to provide realistic, high-level statements that describe what the program will accomplish. Okay, what is this program trying to do? So your program, the goal may be to stabilize housing for immigrant families within the first 3 months of them attaining immigration status. Okay, so that's very high level. It identifies the target population, right? Immigrant families. And what is the problem? Well, we are stabilizing their housing within how long? 3 months of them getting status. So that's pretty specific. You know how long, you know who it is, and you know what it is you're doing. Okay. Phil, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the broad way to look at that is you're moving from the broadest kind of statement to generally more specific. That's the way you kind of think about that conceptually.
Absolutely. Okay. So here are some examples of that. So goal number 1 just says, we want to reduce youth incarceration. Okay, so we know you're reducing youth incarceration, but who are you working with? Who's your target population? This is a rather unfortunate. I have somebody knocking at my back door. I don't know who it is. So please, I'm going to put myself on mute and mute my screen. Phil, can you please take over until I come back, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So as Amma was saying, you're taking that broad goal, reduce incarceration. Then you're making it more specific. We're going to serve how many, that's quantifiable, and who, youth at risk of being incarcerated. So it takes that goal and makes it more specific so that now you have a measurement based on what you say the overall goal is. Now we have something that our progress can be measured against. Same thing for the second one. We're going to feed this town's, Chicago's homeless, okay? If you wanted to reduce that down to something that we could use in a smart, measurable goal, it's feed 1,000 people, make it specific, and those are homeless, and we're going to give them a certain amount of meals a day, and then it's time limited between September of 2013 and December of 2014, which would mean we're time travelers, but This is just a example. It's specific, measurable, it's achievable, and it's over a specific time frame. So that is how we think about moving from, again, that broad statement to something that a funder, an outside person, can look at and pin their analysis on what you say you can do. And then also, it is then internally your benchmark, your performance standard for internally what you're trying to do. Next slide. Did you want to add something to that?
No, only that I had to jump off because apparently there is a huge leak going on in the building, a water leak. So I might end up having to jump off again, but I can take up from here. Okay, so the same thing applies when you are developing your program objectives. Okay, so what is the program objective? Your program objectives describe the actions and the tasks you will take during the program to accomplish your mission. Okay, so if we said that you're going to work with, I forget, did we say 100 families? I can't remember now.
Yes.
100 families within 3 months to get them situated with housing, right? Once they have status. So one of the objectives, you would come up with an objective to make sure you can meet that goal. Okay, so it could be to host quarterly sessions with families and to ensure that they come to monthly case management meetings with said case manager. Those are your objectives to meet your mission. And so I'm giving it a set number of times they need to meet the case manager, a set amount of meetings that they probably need to come to, or presentations to help them about housing, different, like know your rights maybe with housing. So I'm giving some specific objectives that are measurable that will meet the goals of the program. Okay, so if we're saying quarterly, we can say quarterly, or we can say 4, right? 4 meetings a year, or to meet quarterly throughout the year. But you're giving some specific measurable outcomes. Did you meet with them 4 times out of the year? Was it on a quarterly basis? Okay, so it explains to the grant funder how you accomplish your goal and requires many objectives to complete a single goal, right? So there's usually you have one goal and then you have several objectives under it. Sometimes you can have more than one goal, but for this, we're talking about one goal. Okay?
And the reason this is important is that you want to show the steps. So when you're measuring, it's like you want to show the steps to where you're going to your goals so that those can be measured too. Absolutely. So we have this goal up here. Then how do we get to that? Do we do all of the little steps, all of the pre-steps to getting that? And so your thinking about that has to be, I'm identifying them for my funder. I'm also identifying them internally for us so that we know that we are progressing towards them. If we set them up to fit together, if we don't meet what our goal was, then we can say, well, what were the things beneath that that we were supposed to have done or should have done to get to it? So it's an accountability, a measure thing, a planning tool.
And it's a roadmap. It literally is
Yes.
your roadmap. It literally is your roadmap. You should be able to look at that and say, okay, this was our goal. Were we able to do these things? Were these outcomes, which we're going to get to next, what were the outcomes? And those outcomes should be measurable as well, okay? So let's look at some program objectives. Here we have an objective that says, help applicants apply to jobs. How many applicants? Okay. And how are you going to make sure that they get those jobs? So a really good objective would be host 20 job training workshops for 200 applicants in the first year. Okay, so you know how many applicants you're working with, you know how many job fairs you're going to have to give them the ability and opportunity to apply for a job. Okay, so second one, give out sports scholarships. Well, how many sports scholarships and to whom? Okay, well, we're going to give out 150 sports scholarships to 6 participants. That's a little backwards, but yes, they're going to give out 150 sports scholarships to 6 participants. Okay, so we know how many participants there are, and we know approximately how many each of them will get, because they're going to garner 150 sports scholarships. So again, it's going from your goal is measurable, how many families in how many months, to your objectives, how many sessions, how many case management sessions are we going to do that to make sure? Okay, and then we go to our outcome. Your outcomes, a lot of times, think about it as your guesstimation of your success. Okay, so program outcomes. These specify benefits or changes for individuals or populations during or after participating in a program. It uses quantitative metrics to determine whether the outcome has been achieved, and it demonstrates to what extent objectives have been met. As Phil said, you will be able to see, well, which objectives didn't we meet, or where did we have challenges that prevented us from this anticipated outcome? Okay, so let's take a look at some examples here. So outcome number 1, applicants were more ready for college. So how many of the applicants were more ready for college? And what do you mean? How were they ready for college in the first year, the 4th year? Like what, how do we know? How do we know that they're ready for college? At what point? So they're saying 95% of program participants graduated college in 4 years or less. So instead of saying that they were more ready for college, well, we know how many actually graduated. 95% of them. And they did it in this specific time frame. This was the outcome. Okay, so we can go back to our families. What is the outcome? Is it going to be 100% of all families are placed in stable housing within 3 months of their immigration status, achieving their immigration status? Can we say that? Is that realistic? Maybe it is. Or maybe there'll be some that might fall outside of that 3-month time frame. So maybe only 95% of the families get situated within 3 months of gaining immigration status. The other 5%, it might take them a little bit longer because there may be some challenges. Or, well, yeah, it has to fall outside, because if they do it within or quicker than that, they're within that 3 months. So anything that falls outside of that, you would be bringing that up in your reporting too. Why did that 5% have that issue? And that might be something that you adapt or change your programming to make sure that you can mitigate that moving forward. Let's look at the second outcome. Participants have more housing stability. Or 80% of participants will stay in stable housing for 1 year or more. Fits actually with the with this example as well, that we're talking about 100 families attaining stable housing within 3 months. We're saying within 3 months, they will attain it. Okay, does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about how you would make your outcome, your objective, or your goal measurable using the SMART? Okay, Netza.
He's asking, how do you calculate outcomes if they have not occurred?
So
Now,
again, like we said, outcomes are almost like an estimation of what you expect. Okay, like I said, we're going to work with 100 families, but do we know that 100 families will be 100% situated in 3 months? Probably not. So instead of saying 100%, we would probably say more like 95%, given what you have done in the past. So you look at your programming in the past. How many families, if that's something that would fit with you, how many families were you able to get situated when you've
so
worked?
to answer Netz's immediate question, this is a forecast, an estimate of outcomes. Yes, especially since in this program we have a previous year to go by, so you have a little bit more realistic understanding what's possible.
For
But
those of
remember
you,
what we're saying. I want everyone here to understand this point. This is not a gotcha thing where you put this up and if you don't meet this, you're in trouble. No, what it's saying is you don't want to submit in this submission something that doesn't have a numerical goal over a specific time frame, because that's not answering the question they're asking you. So if you were just to say that applicants are more ready for college, if you don't specify that you're going for the 9%, then you could be saying, well, 5% of them are ready for college. But would that be really what you're trying to achieve here, that only 5 out of 95? No, you're trying to say the opposite. So this is a measurement that helps you do your thing and explain to them why your program is important. But if you don't have the numbers and if you're not delineating them by time and specific activity, you're actually not answering the call of the question. You're not answering the question that's being asked.
and make sure it's realistic. Those
Yes.
numbers need to be realistic. Like he says, it's not a gotcha. So it's not about, well, if I say I'm going to work with 95%, and you know that perhaps with this specific population that you work with, you know that there are challenges. Maybe there's challenges with paperwork. So maybe it's not 95%. Maybe it's only 80% will be situated within 3 months. But you know that given what you've done before, you know your population. Netza has another question.
No, that was it. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It was clear.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you, my dear.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Okay, so we will move on to the next slide. So, goals, objectives, and outcomes development. There's important considerations that you need to be thinking about when you are putting these together. So, what staffing and resource constraints do you have? Okay, if you're talking about case management of 100 families, can one case manager handle all that? Or maybe do you need 2 case managers? Or maybe you need 1.5 case managers. One case manager is full-time and you have another case manager that is part-time. But you need to be thinking about that because that's going to go into your budget. You don't want to say 100 families and then you don't have enough case managers to handle that 100 families with the caseload and the timeline that you've given the families to be seen by that case manager. So you need to be thinking about all of that. Okay, so what are the staffing and resource constraints or things that you need in order to make sure that that goal is carried out?
Because that's essentially what your budget is about. That's what your requests are. So you want to make sure that the things you identify there are things that the grant covers.
Exactly. So how does that affect what you can accomplish during the proposed performance period? Okay, so you think about that. What do I, and you don't want to be thinking about that in the middle of the grant period, like, oh, we forgot about, it's too late. They've already given you your money. So you need to make sure that you have all of that, you're thinking about that ahead of time. What do I need to accomplish these goals? What are the goals of the grant funder? Because the grant funder is giving you this money because they have a mission and a goal that they're trying to meet. Okay, so how can you create goals, objectives, and outcomes that align with that? Well, the first thing you need to be looking at, does our organizational mission align with the funder's mission? If you've got alignment there, or program alignment or project alignment there, then now you can start to see, can I create some goals, objectives, and outcomes around this specific program that we want to do that, yes, aligns with this funder's mission. Okay. What past and current programs has your organization administered? What successes did you have? So again, NHTSA, this is where you can go back to sort of get that guesstimate, that estimate, that forecast of what you think your outcomes are going to be based on previous programming. And you also want to talk about, what were those successes? What were those standout things that happened when we were implementing our program? Okay.
Yes,
you want to think about those things. Yes, NHTSA.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. It's really good.
How can you expand successful programs? How can you reach more participants or communities with your organization, where your organization has relationships? You want to think about that. That might be one of your goals. That might be one of your objectives, to increase partnerships with property management firms, housing firms. You might want to do something like that to create a pipeline of families into these properties. What similar programs currently exist? What distinguishes your program from similar programs? What makes you stand out? These are things we've talked about. And what innovative and creative programs can your organization implement? What are gaps in services that are being provided in the target population or within this target issue area? So this is sort of like giving you, like, when you're thinking about your programming, or you're thinking about, what do we want to do? You want to be thinking about, what are the gaps in services? And what is it that we do well? What is our niche?
That is a great way to look at it, Anna. See, these important considerations are actually great touch points for the narrative part of your request, because these are the things that differentiate you from other organizations and talk about your value added in the space that you're saying you're going to work in and apply it. So these are actually selling points, potential selling points in the narrative part of your request about why we're doing this program and why we're doing it this way. So don't think of this part, again, negatively. Think of this as an insight into how to talk to the funder, in this case, the HUJ Coalition, but by extension, the state of Illinois.
And any other funder.
This is the way to talk to them on their basis. And let me say one other thing about the numbers in these goals, outcomes, and objectives. So they're what you as an applicant, you're essentially a sub-grantee of the coalition, of the A2J coalition. You are a sub-grantee, which means the things that you identify as your goals, objectives, and outcomes, cumulatively, you and all the rest of your colleagues here, cumulatively, those become the goals of the coalition. All right, that they are then measured by the legislature, by the people looking at this grant for funding in the future. So all of this should be taken very seriously, and understanding that it all fits together in the whole package that will be presented at some point to the state, this is what we did.
Absolutely. And
Does that make
understand,
sense?
it really, that's it in a nutshell. You've made it very apparent and very clear. Okay. And like I said, and he's saying, your goals, objectives, and your outcomes are not separate of your narrative. That is your narrative. You know, you're explaining what your goals, objectives, and outcomes will be based on your program.
You're
That
just
is
putting
your
it in another form,
exactly.
in a data kind of form.
Exactly. Okay. Okay, so key performance metrics. Key performance metrics are quantifiable measures of progress towards your program success. Organizations must be able to report on these regularly, either monthly, quarterly, or bi-monthly. Okay, especially for this group, you will have to be submitting your reports either monthly or quarterly in order to get reimbursement for programming expenses. So it is very, very important that you are culling this information and making sure that you get it in a timely fashion, because at the end of the day, that's how you're going to get paid. Okay, so that's very, very important. Remember that. So examples of key performance metrics: percentage of people in eviction court who were not evicted. Okay, that's something that you can report on. That's a success. Percentage of people who are not arrested in a 3-year period. That's a key success. Again, like I even said, percentage of families that were situated in housing within 3 months of getting their immigration status. That's a key performance metrics. Number of affordable housing units built, or how about how number of affordable housing units garnered for those families. Okay. You may have a number. You may say that of all the families that you situate, 75% of them, or 75 families, will be put into affordable housing. The rest of them will be able to get regular unsubsidized housing. Okay, so you're thinking about it like that. There's a number you can put to that. Or here, number of youth mentor relationships established and held for 1 year. Okay, so if somebody was doing mentoring, you would think about and sort of figure out how many of those relationships will be established. You might want 100, maybe only 85 get established. Okay, I saw a hand go up. Netzar, you have a question?
So let me say this about these. Again, to reiterate, this is a voucher-based program, which means you're going to have to show your progress in that monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly time frame that you're submitting that voucher for. And what has been pointed out in this program is that you can't get behind on that. You have to stay current, first of all, so they can track the numbers, but also to get your money. So it behooves you to have that set of interim indicators that says your progress towards the ultimate objectives. So those goals, the monthly, and those are the things that say we're doing the work towards our regular goals, that the ultimate objectives we're talking about. So pay us, because we did this. It costs. These are what these are all expenses towards the objective for this period of time. This is all smart. Here's our smart stuff. Give us our smart money.
Right. Okay. So again, very important, aligning your goals and your performance metrics. I mean, it makes no sense if your goal is to situate 100 families within 3 months and you are reporting on how many of them took citizenship classes. It's not aligned. It may be 2 of the things that you do, but it is not aligned with that goal. It's not aligned with what you said that you were going to be doing, okay? So goals. Goals are realistic, high-level statements that describe what the project will accomplish. Performance metrics. Do the measurable metrics show whether the goal has been accomplished? So it's not that we don't care about citizenship classes. That has nothing to do with how many families are situated within 3 months. So your metric should be how many families were situated within 3 months. How many families? You're dealing with 100, but maybe, like you said, only 85 got situated within 3 months. Goals identify the target populations that you plan to serve. 100 families with immigration status, right? That's who that is. That is your target population. Do the metrics track information about the target population and how they are being engaged? Yes. Didn't we talk about the number of case management sessions? Yes. Didn't we talk about the number of presentations? Those are your performance metrics that you would be putting there to say, did we do the things that we said we were going to do with that target population to make sure they get situated within 3 months of immigration status? I'm going to keep on saying that. I'm going to keep on making sure that you see that it's measurable. It stays in that SMART framework. Okay. So goals address specific, pinpointed problems. Do the metrics relate to the identified problems that the program is supposed to address? We're giving them case management. We're giving them presentations and workshops about knowing your rights as a tenant. So once they get situated, they can stay situated, right? And we're doing this within 3 months of them gaining the immigration status. So we can measure that. Did we get them situated or not within 3 months? And did they stay that way based on the case management and the other programming inputs that we avail them of? Does that make sense? Okay. So each of your organizations, you're going to be filing or submitting your proposal under one of 4 headings, right? There's the New Immigration Community Navigators, NOFA. There's also the New Immigration Legal Services, NOFA. There's the, is it criminal justice? Or criminal
incarceration. It's called incarceration.
Incarceration services. You're going to have community navigators for that, as well as legal services. So each of you should have already been looking in your NOFA and see what the funder is looking for. Okay, remember, your program has to align with what their goals, objectives, and outcomes are for the funding, okay, that they have, that they're giving to you as a sub-grantee. So each of you has your breakdown. New immigration, you guys have your measurable goals, objectives, and outcomes. They're asking you for the number of community navigators recruited and trained, number of immigrant education presentations. So they're looking for education presentations, okay? Number of individuals reached through immigrant education presentations. They've also said immigrant education presentation. So you know you need to be doing that. And they're saying you can do it virtual and in person. Just tell us how many of the virtual you did and how many of the in person, okay? Number of individuals referred to legal services. So they're telling you their goal is they want to make sure individuals get legal services. They want to make sure that they get education presentations, and they're giving you 2 ways to do it. They want to know how many people you hire to make sure that that gets done, and number of individuals provided with accompaniment. So that means you need people to go with people somewhere, whether it be to court or somewhere, you need that. So they're giving you some specific measurable objectives and outcomes to model your, align your program against, okay? Same, new immigration legal services, number of legal screenings, number of research and investigation services, number of cases accepted for representation, and indicate number of cases to be accepted in each of the categories below, and they break that down for you, okay? So you need to be looking at that and aligning your program with these goals, objectives, and outcomes. You may have some additional ones that speak to this, but these are the ones that the funder is saying, A2J is saying they need to see these things in your program. Because like Phil said, collectively, all these are going to come together, and those measurable goals and objectives and outcomes go up to the overall funder, okay? So it's very important, sorry about that, I'm just letting people in. So it's very important that you're aligning your programming. Same, new incarceration, community navigators, number of community navigators recruited and trained, number of individuals reached through outreach campaigns, so slightly different. Number of individuals provided with legal education, you've got that both virtual and in person. Number of individuals provided with initial assessment, okay? Listen to concern basic screening. So sounds to me like you need some case managers or somebody for that. Number of individuals referred to legal services, number of individuals provided accompaniment again, and total number of unduplicated individuals provided with additional support. That's very important. They don't want, at the end of the day, they need to get some extrapolated numbers that is unduplicated. Because some of these things there, they get more than one service, but they want to know how many of these folks unduplicated got an additional support, okay? Very important for their reporting. So it's very important for you to make sure you capture that for them, okay? Same thing here. Just some little differences. This one's number of cases closed by level of service, limited action. Number of cases closed by level of service, counsel and advice. Number of cases closed by level of service, extended services. Number of other services, information, referrals, et cetera. So you see, anybody that's going to be doing new incarceration legal services, you need to be capturing this information. This needs to be a part of your programming. Ergo, you need to make sure that you're budgeting for this, because your funder is going to be making sure that this is something that you're capturing in your program. And then they're asking you to please indicate the types of cases your agency will provide services on or under the Illinois A2J. So if you add on more, make sure you're budgeting for more and you've given rationale in your narrative, okay? If you're doing something outside of what you normally do. All right, so what we want to do now, taking a time check, make sure we're okay, is to go over, have you all create one set of goals, objectives, and outcomes. So just come up with your goal, your objectives, and your outcome, and then we'll just, do we want to, Phil, do we want to break it up into groups, or do we want them to just do a popcorn share?
I think we've got so much to go. Let's just do a popcorn share.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
So just take one goal that you have that's realistic, maybe something you did the year before or something you're thinking about now, it doesn't really matter. But you want to go from that specific of that goal to breaking it down to something that's smart, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So remember the elements we talked about here. Can you go from that broad goal to something that you can measure? It's specific. You can achieve this. It makes sense. It's relevant to what the grant's asking you for, and it has a time frame around it. And so just, if you
In the
then
chat.
just in the, if you want to share with us verbally, or just, you can even put it inside the chat when you come up with something.
And we'll just take like,
And we'll just
3
take a couple and look at them and talk about them. So there's no, again, we're not trying to get anybody. We're just trying to help each other all think through this. So if you have something that you're not quite sure about, put it down there and we can deal with it.
And then we'll move on to cost budgeting, because we want to make sure that that's very important. There's some key elements to the cost budgeting that we want to make sure we get across, so that you guys are developing your budgets soundly and in conjunction with your SMART goals, objectives, and outcomes, your SMART deliverables. Okay.
Amma and Phil, I want to make sure you see John's question too, and maybe are there some like recommendations on how you can estimate goals, like based off of past service provision or staffing, or any thoughts there?
Okay, let me see. Let's read that. We do immigration cases for individual clients. We have no idea how many will ask us for assistance in a year, or in what categories, or how many hours each of these cases will take. Our goal is to help as many as possible. How does that fit into your measurable goals and metrics?
Well, what we could start with there, John, is you do immigration cases for individual clients. How many clients do you see a year? Just start with that base number. Okay. And then you said you have no idea how many will ask for assistance in a year. So last year, you can go back and look at how many clients did you have, okay? And how many of them asked you for assistance? You can even go back 2 years and measure 2 years against themselves. Are they close? If they're very disparate, then you might want to like, well, what was happening that it was this many families, this go around, and this many, but you can always go back to previous performance, okay? But look first off, how many individual clients did you work with on an annual basis? How many of them asked you for assistance? Okay. And then, or how many hours each case will take. Well, now that is subjective, right? It depends on whatever is going on with that individual. But again, you can look back to what you have done, and on average, how long does it take for a case manager or a program, whoever, coordinator, to walk an individual through whatever assistance they may need? Maybe it's housing. Okay. Did it take just a week? Did it take just one phone call, or did it take 3 months? You can go back and look at that. What did you do last year? And you base that on what you think you can do this year. If the situation is still the same, then you would probably put the same numbers in. Or you may think about, well, this is how many people we gave assistance to last year that we could give assistance to. But these many people asked us for assistance. So maybe this year you're increasing your caseload to work with me. Instead of 25, you're now going to work with 50. But in order to work with 50, you need another case manager.
That's a great way to look at it. So you kind of look at what was old or trying to establish some kind of baseline. Then you think about what's different. Well, we're applying for some money, so maybe that will increase our capacity. Maybe that means we can hire a case manager, or we can add, this element to our program, which would then increase our numbers by this much. And you can just use whatever increment that cost, that budget side, that grant side might add on a percentage basis. So there is a certain amount of estimation and guesswork, but it's an educated guess based on what you've done before, based on what your known capacity is that you have, and based on the assumption that you're going to get this grant funding for this particular thing to add to possibly your outcomes.
So John, does that make sense? Just look at what you've been doing as your baseline, and then you can make your educated guesses or estimates based off of that. Netza, I'm just gonna, I think, okay. Be granted. Excellent. So John, you said meet with 4 undocumented immigrant survivors of domestic violence to assess availability of legal remedies. Okay. So you'll be working with, is it 4 clients a quarter or 4 clients every 6 months, or 4 clients within a year? That's what I would want to know. We get it that it's 4 and they're undocumented. So you're clear about your population, and you know it's 4 of them. And even more specificity, these are survivors of domestic violence. So we even know that they're undocumented and DV victims. And you're going to case manage them throughout the year. That's fine. I mean, it's whatever you say, but you're going to case manage 4 DV undocumented survivors and give them legal services, whatever those legal services are, because it says availability of legal remedies. So whatever those are, or you might be specific in what the legal services are going to be, unless it's just open. Okay. So it's sort of like trying to just get it as specific as possible so you can go right to it and say, yes, before we did it in this amount of time, they were exactly the population that we said it's going to be, and these were the services that we did over this spans of time. Okay, but that's excellent. Starting with that specificity. Excellent. Any other questions, anybody? I'm looking at some of these as I'm talking, and statistically beneficial 50 clients living with severe mental illness to increase their ability to secure housing and connect with healthcare. So Ruth, excellent. Some of your objectives would be number of clients who secure housing, number of clients who connect with healthcare services. Okay, you would break that down. Okay, so we know how many numbers of each, because it might be only 1 got housing and 49 got connected with healthcare. Is that how you want to do it? Or are you specific about, you want to make sure you've got a number of people in secure housing, a number of people that you are targeting for healthcare? Okay, so you can just specify that just a little.
As well as the other sub goals that lead into them that might have to do with outreach. Like how many people you start with initially to get to those ultimate numbers. That also shows, you know, how much you're reaching out. Right.
Okay, so remember, go back to all of these and then add what you know you also need to do to accomplish. Okay. Okay. So that was excellent. If there are no more questions, we'll go on to cost budget. So we make sure.
And let me just say before this, including what Amos just covered and the cost budget part, your default is always your program officer. If you're in immigration, it's Jane Lombardi. If you're in the justice incarceration side, it's Sharice. There, if you have particular questions about your particular thing, they're the people you should ask specifically if you're really down.
Yes.
Okay. So what's this cost budget we're talking about? Well, it's the tool that you use to estimate and plan costs. It helps you project and analyze the expenses, as we've been talking about. It's like we don't know exactly, but it helps us then come up with a formulation. It's for voucher-based performance reimbursement. So I hope everyone understands, and everyone on this call should understand at this point, that this is a voucher-based program. You perform the work, you incur the expenses, and then you apply with that voucher to get those expenses recouped, reimbursed up to your final grant amount. So you're approved for a grant, you don't get a check the next day. You get your checks in increments based on your performance as pointed out in that voucher, which is both a activities, program objectives, measurement kind of thing, because it's saying what we did, but it's also allocating a portion of those budget line items that are applicable to this grant, and they said they will pay for this kind of thing, to what you say you're doing. So you have to submit these timely and completely. So you can't leave out data and you can't be late. And if you do so, that can affect your payment and your very continuation in the program. So if you don't want to get Sharice and Jane on their bad side, submit these things late without the information you're using. Because you don't want to do that, because eventually you could lose this grant.
Well, and the other thing that you need to think about when you say continuation of the program, it's a cash flow issue. So if you are not vouchering on a regular basis in the way that they're telling you to voucher, you could mess up your own budgeting process, and you may not have enough cash flow to get you to the next vouchering session. So you want to make sure you stay with your payments, make sure you are keeping your receipts and you're reporting appropriately what they want to see, and you are also sending it at the right time. Okay. And no, you're not going to voucher 3 times in a month. They're not that, don't do that.
That's right. Follow the directions you get.
Follow directions. And think about that, because you cannot voucher 3 times in 1 month. So make sure you have the cash flow already there, and make sure that you're vouchering in a timely fashion. Okay. Can't say enough, because that can impede you being able to continue operating in that specific program that you're trying to do.
With or without the grant.
Right.
Because, I mean, really think about it. You've been approved for some payments in that grant, but you don't have them until you follow that procedure and submit that voucher with your performance numbers and your reimbursement numbers. You don't have it until you get it. If you're not holding it, you don't have it. So that's basically the way to think about this. And it also helps you track the effectiveness of your program.
Absolutely.
So these are the general elements of the cost budgeting. We've already got a question already.
Right. I'm going to check it out.
So cost estimates, you're doing some estimates about cost. You're doing direct and indirect costs. Those are things that are charged directly to this program. They fit the parameters of the program or whatever. And then there are the indirect costs, which may mean that there's a portion of your overall budget or whatever can be applied to this, but not all of it. You're going to set these budget guidelines. You're going to list all the costs associated with it, and then what might be applicable to the particular funder or not. Identify everything that you know. Estimate what you expect. There might also be things that you haven't anticipated yet. Everybody understands that. Set this time limit so you understand the cash flow implications, as Amma's talking about. This is a cash flow issue with vouchers, okay? And you want to compare the actual costs. So these are the elements of what make cost budgeting a little different than just saying I'm doing an overall budget that has both the revenue expenses for my whole organization. This is more to be responsive to that voucher system where we're honing in on what are allowable costs, what the funder said they're going to pay for, and then we're being responsible so that we actually receive that money in a timely basis that doesn't disrupt our cash flow.
Right.
Now, the question we've been asked, so here's the budget categories. There's personnel, the people working on this program. Okay, so they're the ones that both do the direct service. If you're saying our ambassador program or our legal services, these are the people that do the direct service or supervise. So they're the ones directly involved in this project. And then they're fringed part of that. And when we get to the particular policies over each of those things, they are stated in the NOFO. So read that very carefully, but also, again, refer to your program officer if you have a very, very specific question, because the guidelines, as we've shown you, as you go from the general SMART principles to the actual guidelines that are there in the NOFO, they are not exactly the same for both programs. So there are differences in the line items and the budget items allowable in the actual incarceration versus immigration services. And some of the classifications between the two programs, incarceration and versus immigrant services, there are differences in those line items, which are specified when you actually go onto the portal and you look at them. But I want you to be aware of them. Everything's not exactly the same. And when in doubt, ask Jane or Sharice.
Okay, so what we have here is a budget form template. And what you will see are just that you've got your personnel, you've got your fringe benefits, if you have travel. Equipment is something that you need to pay close attention to, because for some of you, there's a thing about where you would put equipment. I think anything that's up to $5,000 would go into materials and supplies. Anything that's $5,000 or more is what would go into equipment, but then you have to be careful because then there's other things that have to go on with that, depreciation and things of that nature. So they would like for you to keep things in that materials and supplies line item, if you can. Also, you see their consultant contractors, other direct service costs, and then you have your indirect costs, okay? So build a budget for the entire proposed duration of the grant project, that's 1 year. Complete expense breakdown and narrative for that year. So we're going to talk about the budget narrative in a moment in terms of how you would break that down and what information goes in the budget narrative. Include a cross breakdown of all expenses necessary to achieve the goals. So make sure all the costs are in there and that you are specifying the need for it in the program. That's what would go in that narrative as well. And then you would submit the budget in the A2J format. There's two different budgets formats, and whichever, if you're a returning organization, you would use one budget. If you're a new organization, you'd be using a different budget, okay?
I want to be responsive since we're getting a little short on time. Is Jane on the line still?
Yes, I'm here.
Jane, do you see the question by John Breslin?
Yeah, so, okay. As far as grant reporting and administration, for under the personnel line, that generally is folks that are providing direct services under the program. But if there are positions that are using a portion of their time for A2J grant reporting, then yes, you can include that. But I would also take a look at your indirect cost, and those are some of those back-end administration can be covered through the indirect allocation. And as far as subscriptions, like, yes, you can absolutely include the legal research, case management software. Those are direct program expenses. I'd say for QuickBooks, that would either have to come through indirect or you'll have to do the cost allocation that Amma and Phil were talking about as far as like the percentage that's actually charged to the program.
And anything on the occupancy question? That's from Hu Zing Zhang.
It was from,
Jane?
I see one from
I
Next.
butchered their name.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
have the
that's
same question. We have the same question with.
yeah,
you.
that's the I think Amma and Phil shared about calculating the program costs based off of either square footage or FTE. So I'm not sure if you're going to go through it.
We're going to go through that. That
Okay,
is one of the
great.
slides.
Next. That's actually next.
That's next.
So here you go. There you go, Phil.
So Jane was so helpful in our previous discussion to show us two different options based on how to do that. So how you prorate costs specifically to the AG Access to Justice program. So there they are. I think that what we want to do is send these particular things out since they are so detailed. What do you think about that? Unless people, they'll get the video of this, won't they? Will everyone on this call will get a video of this presentation. But I would like them to have these particular things, and maybe we can send them all out that in a follow-up email after this. So we'll make a note of that, because these are the kind of things that we would need.
So understand that when you're saying to allocate the prorated costs, so this is like your rent, your internet, other items used by staff for more than one program, just like you were asking John, when you were asking about that position, you would have to cost allocate that out.
You're just saying this is the amount that's used for this. Your A2J's grant is not paying for anything not related to this. That's all you're really trying to demonstrate with that. And you can discuss the detail of that in the narrative part of that, where you're making that explanation so that you're transparent. That's all. It's about transparency.
Okay. The next one. Oh, I got somebody at my door. This is the square foot, or
it's the same thing. This is a different option for how to do the same thing. So there are different ways you can come to the calculations. And Jane was really great to give us the specific ways you can do that. So we'll make sure you get these particular slides so you know exactly how to do this. And one other thing, Jane, what is the best way for people who have specific questions like this to get in touch with you, Cerise? I think my understanding was through email, because you would obviously get inundated with a bunch of calls.
Yeah, so through email, but I can put my cell in the chat as well. And for communities impacted by incarceration, those questions should go to Sharice, but I'll add our contact information.
Awesome. That's very helpful. So, as you can see, I think this is all very helpful in the sense that you get the exact kind of thought process behind the calculations that you're going to be able to use here. All right. So here, just a minute. So budget tips. The kind of overall tips you want to have here are follow the categories provided on the portal. So everyone should have access to the portal, has gone in there. The idea here, and I think a good way to proceed with the portal, even though you can go back and forth on it, you don't have to fill out the whole application or budget part or any of that all at one time, it's best to kind of get all of your info in a row and put that down on a separate piece of paper before you go in to keep your thinking straight. Okay, now you want to make sure that the size of this request and the amount of money that you could get for meets the needs of your program. And all of this discussion we're having is to make sure that you can justify these costs, that they're necessary, reasonable for the program. And we want, again, you free detailed explanation of anything in there about your proposed cost. If you've got any subcontractor expenses, just make sure they're applicable and allowable under the rest of the guidelines and the rules under here. And as we've talked about in previous discussions about budget, your budget is really kind of almost a moral document. It's saying what our values are about. And it's also an accountability document for those values. And you should really think about the fact that you'll be held to these numbers. That's why you want them to be not overblown, realistic, and measured, leading very logically from broad goals to those metrics you're talking about. And if you have multiple streams of money going into this, make sure that each of them is being allocated and not just thrown together. You don't want to intermingle.
Exactly. That's that cost allocation. Very important.
That's right.
Okay. What I would like to do is actually move forward and have you guys just look at the 10 steps to a budgeting checklist. Is that okay?
Yeah, let's do that because we're kind of closing up on our time.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that, you guys. I thought it was gonna.
And again, we're gonna make this available to everyone so they have every part of these major slides because it's all very detailed and you want to be able to follow it as it's along.
Okay, can everybody see that or no? I'm trying to share it, but it doesn't seem to want to share.
And John had a very interesting question. What are the limitations of moving or using funds between alternate budget items? Or is there even a limit or restriction to the expenditure of funds in specific budgeted categories?
I can take that, Phil.
Thank you.
So once you are awarded, you are able to, like, up to 10% of a line item, you can move that without a budget revision. However, if there is more than 10% that you need to use for a different line item, then you will need to submit a budget revision, which that process is shared with subgrantees.
So that's good. There is some flexibility. If perhaps something has changed between the time you applied and the awarding of the grant and the submission of your voucher. Maybe there was another funder that came in and handled a certain part of it, and now you want to reallocate that line item in a different way to still be applicable for the grant. And I'm hearing from Jane, as long as that's a 10% thing, it doesn't require a whole new budget revision.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're coming to the end. We have 5 minutes left. I'm hoping that everybody has had a chance to look at their respective budget and understand what that looks like. If not, I can go to that very quickly. I believe it's.
Yes. So everyone, I think at minimum, if you haven't been on the portal, make it your business to do that today, to go in there and poke around and see everything that we're talking about, making sure you look at those checklists so that you can start gathering that information, those data points you're going to need to put in there. And don't be shy about reaching out for help from your program officer, because they are here to help you specifically around this program. So it's good to contact them when you need to, with email or call if it's necessary, and to be as detailed and as transparent as possible so that they can help you.